When did you see an idiot who had no idea what the law was? I had a sovereign citizen walk into my office a few years ago and tried to get me to argue his case in state court after the state seized land he owned for failure to pay taxes. I had a vague idea of what sovereign citizens believed before he came in, so at least I wasn't totally caught off guard. I didn't even try to explain the law though. I just told him I couldn't help him, then gave him the phone number of a lawyer I hate in town, and sent the guy on his way. Mum's significant other is a cop. Had to go to the courthouse to arrest a guy for stealing something from the courthouse. He was in court for stealing. Lawyer was all flustered and like, what the frick? The thief asked why he couldn't have a warning like all the other times he got caught stealing. No, you're going to prison this time. This one guy bought all of a company's shares, which means he bought both the company's assets and its debts, and then he filed a name change with the Secretary of State. He thought changing the corporation's name would legally absolve him of all liability for the company's debts. Why do we have to pay Company X's payroll? This is now Company Y, etc. My God. So many people believe that lawyers will get you out of the huge mess that is purely your own creation. When I tell them that they have little chance in trial because there was a camera that caught every little bit of their stupidity, as an example, I often get them saying, well, what do I have a lawyer for? Or, well, you're not doing a very good job. It's like they think, surely a good lawyer can delete evidence. I think the general misconception is that the legal system runs on a schedule like you see on TV. A lot of clients think that if they come in on Monday, their lawsuit will be filed on Tuesday, then depositions will be done by Wednesday, and by Friday they'll have prevailed in trial. During grand jury duty, I fell asleep and snored very loudly on more than one occasion. Usually during state police testimony, at least the accused and civilian witnesses had some emotion to keep it interesting. Anyway, that's how I got the 50-cent coffee turned into free coffee. I was telling a pro bono client what she needed to do to get her kids back, and one of the things was a clean substance test. I specifically said, so, no green herb, no white snow, no smack, nothing illegal, okay? She agreed surprisingly quickly, so I moved on. 5 minutes later, she interrupted me to say, wait a minute, is ice illegal? Ice is slang for crystal. I think some of the impact was taken out of this story by the fact that the narrator had to change literally every word for an illegal substance. But nonetheless, this woman's incredulousness that she probably shouldn't take the rock that made Walter White's fortune is pretty darn funny. Lawyer here. I do criminal law but had to run a civil trial in my articles. Client was a tenant being sued by a landlord for a metric frick ton of cleaning costs. They insisted they'd left the place spotless. During the trial, it became clear the move-out inspection was done and the cleaning cost estimate a week before the clients actually moved out, and thus before the place was cleaned. A ton of it was estimates of costs to throw out all the stuff left in the suite. You know, the property they hadn't moved out prior to moving out. They were arguing that it didn't matter when the inspection was done. The judge strongly and emphatically disagreed. I did intake and investigation for a law firm for about 4.5 years. Duties included interviewing the client, figuring out if it's a case the lawyer will want, sending along or getting paperwork started if it is, among other things. So, I get a call from this guy. He was calling about a dog bite case. Easy stuff, we always take those cases. So I start interviewing him to get details. It's pretty standard at first, injuries from the bite, medical treatment received, date of injury, and then I get to asking, do you know the at-fault party and was a police report filed? I should know her, she's my wife. Oh, are you currently divorced? Nope. Okay, any chance the dog actually belongs to someone else? Nuh-uh. I see, and you both live together and have the same insurance policy? Yep. Right, well, is your insurance denying the claim? Nope, I just want to sue the B-word. Lovely, sir. Are you guys legally wed with a marriage license and everything? That's right. So I tell him we can't really help him there because, well, in essence, he'd be suing himself. We'd be pursuing her insurance and assets, which are, technically, also his insurance and assets. The insurance company was paying the claim just fine, so he couldn't file for an insurance dispute. I even let him know that, to be perfectly technical, he was bit by his own dog. Nah, man, her family is rich. We can sue her family, man. Does her family own the dog and did it happen on their property? Nope, but it's their fault for raising the witch. Getting him off the phone was a pleasure. Oh man, sovereign citizens are my favorite lunatics. They're always cocked and ready to explain stuff to you about the law, like how taxation is participatory, state-sponsored violence. I knew a guy in college who called himself a sovereign citizen. He kept saying things like, yeah, well, if I don't pay taxes, then what? What are they going to do? I tried to explain they'd arrest him, but he seemed to think that when the cops came, he would announce that he just doesn't give them permission to touch him, and as a sovereign citizen, isn't beholden to their laws. He seemed to think the cops would say, well, crap, he got us. Well, all charges dropped, instead of just overpowering him, cuffing him, and charging him. I pleaded with him not to try this stuff out for real. These idiots make more sense when you realize that they just see laws as kind of a spell. If you say the right words, I am not John Smith, I am John, a person, or know the right spell components, this flag has a gold fringe, so I cannot be tried in this courtroom, then they can somehow get what they want. Rather than ill-conceived, it's more like ignorance. Oh, I couldn't do that? But I didn't know. Nobody ever told me that. I'm innocent. I always ask them, if I didn't know I shouldn't kill you, and I killed you, does that mean I'm innocent? But the cop lied to me, so I ain't even worried. This is all gonna get dropped, no problem. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to represent me pro bono. This is gonna be big for you. Oh, you sweet summer child. I know people try this all the time with freelance authors and artists, but lawyers? Really? As a lawyer, I can confidently say people try this all the time. Do they also say, but it would look great on your resume? Yeah, my resume that of course details all the names of my clients. I did all the testing and schooling necessary if I wanted to work in this awful field of law. I worked in a family law office for a few years. I live in a state in which spousal support, alimony, may be terminated in the event the recipient begins to live with a new romantic partner. One client hated his ex-wife's mother almost as much as his ex. His ex's mum lived with her. He complained often of their codependent relationship. He called our office one day in an unusually good mood. He had had an idea and he needed to come talk to us. They're in a romantic relationship, he practically shouted at me as I let him in the office. Huh? My wife and her mom. I don't have to pay any more alimony if she's in a romantic relationship. Are you telling me that you think your ex and her mother have a romantic relationship? After repeating that, at best, would be wasting his time and money to advance such a stupid argument in the court, he insisted we research its viability anyway. It was really more sad than anything. I mean, that's presumably a case where once you take the payment from him, you really go in hoping that you don't have a case, because who wants to find out all the details and provide the evidence for that? Aside from sovereign citizens, the most common are, I didn't violate the no contact order, he or she called me. But the thing is, these people never hang up immediately, so they do violate it. Or, I didn't assault him or her, I just shoved him or her to the ground. I stole the money, but I gave it back after they called the police. My landlord had his friend serve me, not himself, so I can just ignore the eviction since I wasn't properly served. That's the opposite of correct. Having someone else to do it is required for it to be a proper service. Now, you and your kids need to find a place to rent with an eviction on your record. I'm not a lawyer yet, but while doing a term at a law office, I once had a prospective client say these exact words. I know how the law works. I watch Law and Order. Also, we're in Canada, so, no. During my divorce, my ex asked if I could get ordered to give pet support. She wanted to take our dog and make me pay for it. Vet visits, food, toys, the lot. In case you're wondering, no. If it's not a human, it's property. And if it's property, you accept all responsibility. After all, you don't just go play at the park one day and have no choice but to come home with a dog. If you have a restraining order against someone, then call them. They should either not answer if they know it's you or hang up. It's unlikely that someone would get violated for being called by the person they're restrained from, but they could be. Just like if you're out somewhere and the person who has a restraining order shows up, you should leave to avoid violating the order. You also can't contact that person through a third party. I have a restraining order against my ex, and he asked his father to send me some photographs and a note once. He got violated for it. I work in legislation. One group of individuals have gotten together and decided via a vote that the law which covers all of Scotland doesn't apply to them and they can act as they want to. Ah, I see. Well, I vote that I never have to pay taxes again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Pennsylvania has mandatory jail time for DUIs. Most people who aren't eligible for a diversionary program will plead out the mandatory minimum, do their weekend time, and be done with it. I had a client's mother call me demanding to speak to the judge at sentencing the next day because her son had a kid. No, lady. Lots of criminal defendants have kids. You can't skirt mandatory minimum sentences just because someone has part-time custody of his or her kid. The next day, sure enough, she shows up to court with her son, drunk, and his kid. The son was clearly intoxicated, the kid starts crying, and the mother keeps trying to explain to the judge how he couldn't go to jail because it was his custody day. The judge was not amused and threw him in jail that day. I had one client that devised a scheme to commit loan fraud and then discharge said loan through bankruptcy. I had to shoot that down real quick. I intern at a courthouse. One of my jobs is to walk lay people through filing cases pro se, usually because they're too poor to get a real lawyer. So, helping people with no concept of the law is part of my description, but outside of the true crazies, I think the biggest thing is, I don't want to sue them. I think they think that suing someone is like a terrible, horrible thing, and if they win, it will ruin their opponent forever. And they all want to do something that would require a court order without bringing a case. But can't we just work this out between ourselves? I mean, sure, but then nothing requires either of you to uphold the agreement. But do I really have to go through the court for this? Ignoring the fact that, yes, you do, why are you asking me, a courthouse worker, this? You're already here. Not in court, but saw something on Facebook that made me laugh. Someone I went to school with went to a children's clothes shop in the city centre to buy clothes for her son. She took the tags off the clothes and threw away the receipt. When she got home, she realized that the clothes were too small for her son. She brought them back, demanding a refund. The manager refused, citing store policy that you have to have the tags and the receipt in order to get a refund. She then took a picture of the manager, 2 cashiers, and the security guard of the shop and put them on Facebook along with their names. She wrote a very long, ranty Facebook post claiming that she was entitled to a refund under the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act. The Act lists the various criteria needed in order to get a refund, replacement, or repair of the item that you bought. One of them states that the item must be fit for purpose. It basically means that the item you buy should be able to perform the action it's meant to. So if you buy a hairdryer that doesn't dry your hair, you'd be entitled to a refund, replacement, or repair. You learn this in your very first year of secondary school. She was claiming that because the pair of jeans she bought for her son didn't fit him, they weren't fit for purpose. Despite a metric frick ton of comments telling her that that's not how the law works, she couldn't see her misinterpretation and just kept repeating, "But they don't fit my son." It was hilarious and sad at the same time. The one thing I will say about this awful woman is that there are stores who will refund you for things that you misjudge the size on, but they do have the option to say no at their discretion. And although there are exceptions, you generally have to keep the receipt. When an idiot like the narrator forgets the receipt, he goes in and is so polite, and that generally works for getting a replacement or, something else from the store at least. Going full Karen is not the way you want to try it. I think the most common example of these people I saw was that people thought that if they got away with breaking the law, at some point the money they were stealing belonged to them. Some kind of squatters' rights corollary? Clever people don't like to think of themselves as criminals. Eventually, they rationalize theft. They underpay me, they owe me this money, it's only fair. But when you return to the sweet arms of virtue and justified, you get careless. Case in point, here's a story I found. I was a prosecutor. Virtually everything that comes into criminal court was a matter of stupidity. It's not like on TV. Criminal masterminds are never caught. If you've got some clever plan to defraud your company, chances are you'll get away with it. For a while. We won't catch you until you get stupid. You get caught when you start believing your own bullcrap. I remember one lady who was helping herself to a bunch of county government money. She'd worked out a good plan and executed it flawlessly. No one casually examining the books would ever detect her theft. So the years, yes, years, went by and she got lazy. I mean, she put so much effort into concealing her theft, and nobody even so much as looked at her books. It was a lot of double-entry drudgery to conceal her peculation. She stopped working so hard at it after a while. Basically, she decided that the money she was taking was her money. They owed her, it was only fair. So she kept on taking money, she didn't just hide it under paperwork anymore. And nothing happened. No one even looked. She was more confident that even if someone did a forensic audit, they'd see the justice of the thing. The county owed her. It was her money. Finally, someone looked. They did see the justice of the thing. She was arrested. That's when I met her. She was furious. To her, it was all so unfair. Here she'd worked so hard to conceal her little peculation habit, and nobody even looked. It's like they didn't look on purpose, to trick her into letting her guard down. What about that, huh? Isn't that some kind of entrapment to trick people into letting their guard down? Why was I picking on her? It's all the fault of those lazy a-holes who didn't check her books when she was taking the time to cover up her theft by pretending it was just bad accounting. If they'd done their jobs and caught her earlier on, there would have been so much less money missing, and she wouldn't have gotten as much trouble. But they didn't even try, and now it's a ton of money. How was that her fault? Life is unfair, I guess. She didn't get a life sentence. I think it was 5 years plus restitution. While I was working in the DA's office, I offered a defendant a plea deal on a low-level traffic offense. The deal would let him keep his license if he agreed to pay off his fines within 3 months. After he agreed and signed it, he asked, "So, do I get a bill later for your services?" I had to tear up the plea deal and explain to him again that I work for the state and I don't represent his interests. Then I had to get him to sign another one. A client of my father once assumed that the judge would go easier on him because he'd already confessed to his priest, and in the end, that's the judgment that matters most. This was for kidnapping and the unspeakable act, by the way. A guy was surprised to learn that he had to pay off his mortgage balance before he could get his title deeds back, and he'd never heard of this before. He said we were supposed to be helping him and threatened to tell the professional legal body here. I encouraged him. Many lay clients protested us asking questions about their story. Apparently, since we were their lawyers, we had to believe everything they said and not question it. A guy tried to enforce a contract and said that there was a signed document, so it must be 100% enforceable. And then there was this guy representing himself in person. He thought that, among other things, the judge was biased against him because the judge didn't accept his views. All judges that have dealt with him are corrupt because they didn't rule in his favor. He demanded the correct transcript, which accords to his recollection of events, and he called the judge Queen B-word and faxed hardcore adult material to the courts. The statute says I have to knowingly possess these substances, and that means I had to know they were illegal. Also, the sovereign citizens I've been dealing with more and more frequently always want me to argue the typical "I never created joinder with the Corporation of the United States" stuff. I had a friend who gave 30 days notice to their landlord somewhere towards the beginning of the month, though not on the 1st. Their landlord then began making plans for upgrades and repairs beginning on the 1st of the following month. But no, my friend said. The 30-day notice went from the 10th of this month until the 10th of the next month. They'd even gone so far as to spell this out in the written notice provided to the landlord, including a quote of the prorated amount of rent they would pay for the extra 10 days they would occupy the apartment past the 1st. The landlord couldn't wrap their mind around this idea. He had workers there bright and early on the 1st, ready to begin remodeling the kitchen. My friend refused them entry. They called the landlord and he insisted that since rent was due on the 1st, the 30 days notice began on the 1st, not the 10th. In spite of the written notice provided by the tenant and several follow-up conversations, not to mention that prorated rent check. My friend did talk to a lawyer. It took some doing to get the lawyer to understand, given how odd the situation was. The lawyer even said it might be hard to find precedents, simply due to the sheer stupidity of the landlord. This was such a straightforward issue. He advised to essentially ignore the idiot if possible and call the cops if necessary. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. The landlord left them alone for the most part. The 10th arrived and they moved as promised. So I'm not a lawyer, but someone who was never the sharpest tool in the shed from school. found out you couldn't be tried for the same crime twice. So he was tried for theft when he was younger. However, as the witness didn't show up to give a statement, the case on him fell through or something. So after finding this golden info about not being tried twice, he thought he could never be tried again for theft. Went and nicked a video game from a huge chain supermarket which has signs saying, "We will prosecute all incidents of theft," and his prime defense was, "But you can't be tried for the same crime twice, and I was tried for theft when I was 16. In short, you can be tried for the same crime twice. At boot camp, we had one bright-eyed young soul go stomping off to the leadership after we got out our first pay stub, because we didn't get paid overtime. The lieutenant was even nice to him at first and pointed out that we were salaried and exempt, so overtime wasn't a thing. The dude tried to argue a few different things about minimum wage and Illinois' state laws and finished with a threat that he was going to contact the state labor board. The lieutenant laughed in his face and told him good luck, then called his immediate supervision and had them revoke his phone privileges. Not because the threat would have worked, but just to prove a point. My stepson fully believed that if he had another child, that his child support would be lowered on the first two. I tried to tell him that it didn't work that way, but he didn't believe me. He is not a smart man. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.